All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Catherine Garney, and the lady you can see here as well is Rose Riley. And welcome to webinar one of our series of Unexplained Infertility. So, over the next kind of 6 to 12 months, we will be doing a number of talks. We're not sure exactly when, so we don't have any commitments and dates, but we're going to do a number of talks on the different kind of areas that we see in clinic that crop up when it comes to unexplained infertility. Tonight, we'll be chatting about the very, very important topic of folic acid versus folate and exploring why supplementing with folate is going to actually improve your fertility outcome rather than actually supplementing with folic acid. So we're going to go into some great detail as to why that is tonight. So before I hand over to Rose, who's going to introduce herself, I thought I'd just introduce myself briefly. So I am a registered clinical nutritionist. So I've been in practice now for about 10 years. I have a clinic based in Tauranga where I see face-to-face clients, but I also do a majority of clients by Zoom across New Zealand. I've got some clients in Australia and UK at the moment, which is really awesome. So my areas of specialization is mainly gut issues, allergies, hormonal issues, autoimmune diseases, and fertility nutrition. And kind of why I really want to do this and to really help sort of spread the message about unexplained infertility is really because of my own personal journey with secondary infertility. So I did have my first son in 2008, and it took me about 10 years to finally be able to conceive naturally and give birth to my daughter, who's a bit of a miracle child, at age 44 with no medical intervention at all. And that was in 2019. So there was about 10 years of actually researching and trying to understand what was going on with me and just sort of turning myself inside out. So I now want to use this knowledge to kind of pass it on to other people. You might be wondering, okay, so if you're a so-called kind of fertility nutrition specialist, why did it actually take you so long to get pregnant? Why did you not have all the answers from the beginning? And the truth is that things have changed over the last 10 years with the kind of nutrition and natural health industry. There's a lot more testing that is available for clients these days. Things like you can now, through a naturopath or a nutritionist or a functional medicine practitioner, easily get a full thyroid panel, get a Dutch test, get your MTFHR gene tested, get vitamin D tested, all these things that up until 5 years ago were really hard to get tested through your GP or for your fertility specialist. So the things have evolved and there's a lot more kind of availability of these tests. And this is what we're going to cover a lot in this series as well. So we'll be covering thyroid, we'll be covering gut, covering all the things that can really have an impact on fertility. All right, so that's enough about me. So I'm going to now pass you on to Rose, who's going to talk a bit about herself. So I'll just make you host, Rose, because you're then going to kick off with the actual presentation.
Hi everyone. I trained with Catherine, and it's a real pleasure collaborating with her to spread the word about the pitfalls of folic acid with you tonight. Like Catherine, I'm a registered clinical nutritionist, but I've arrived at this point in my profession from a very different path than Catherine. I'm very fortunate not to have faced the trials of infertility and repetitive failed IVF personally. I had 5 straightforward successful pregnancies. My passion in this area comes from my clients over the years who have faced delayed conception due to unexplained infertility, and the joy I've witnessed when focusing on my computer seems to have gone bust. I don't know if I disappeared to you, but I disappeared to me. So
you're still there. We can still see you.
So yeah, really for my clients and the joy of witness when I've seen them, when we're focused on their functional health and their well-being, and they've conceived and welcomed a precious wee person into their world. So it's a great thing to be part of. I do functional testing, the types of things that Catherine talked about, and genetic screening, and my focus is really to help parents to be to get healthy, to prepare for pregnancy, so they optimize their fertility, and of course pass on that health to the next generation. Focusing on your well-being and optimizing your cellular function are the most important things you can do to support successful conception and a healthy pregnancy. I'm absolutely convinced of that. We've both seen it over and over. And I'm currently developing an online course to walk parents to be through the essentials of preconception preparation. So if you want to pre-order my registration for the online course, you can contact me through my website, but I hope to have that actually advertised before too long. Now, so today we are here to discuss, as I said, the pitfalls of folic acid in functional health for many individuals. And we're going to explain the reasons and how you might find out whether it's something that you need to be really aware of. To start off, unfortunately, public health policy is targeted at a very general population, and it's often based on really outdated research or research populations that don't correlate across geographic locations or socioeconomic differences, things like that. So in this webinar, we hope to clarify for you why health policy recommendations for folic acid supplementation may in fact be detrimental to your ability to conceive and carry to full term. It's all about nutritional status and genetic variations. We're going to explain the difference between folate and folic acid, which are both forms of vitamin B9. And we're going to discuss the genetic variations that specifically mean you can't metabolize folic acid effectively. In New Zealand currently, policy for folic acid supplementation is focused primarily on reducing the risk of neural tube defects. GPs are recommended to write you scripts for 5 milligrams folic acid or more daily, and told that this will help you have a successful pregnancy. Now, research does show that some folic acid has been instrumental in minimising incidence of NTDs. We're not denying that. However, this is a very big but, new science is providing greater insights into why policy is focusing on the wrong form of vitamin B9, and that's what we want to help you understand today. Folic acid is the man-made inactive form of B9. It's not the same as folate, which is the natural form of B9, and it can have some serious effects on your fertility, depending on your individual genetic variations. As Catherine mentioned, specifically the MTHFR variations, which can be up to around 15% of people in some populations. And yeah, just reinforcing what Catherine said, you can readily get your genes screened to identify what genetic variations might affect your fertility. Gene screening for health has now become readily available as a result of the Human Genome Project, which was completed less than 20 years ago. A huge breakthrough in science, which is changing our understanding of functional health. But it's really important to know you're working with a reliable lab, so don't just go out there and get your genes screened. Work with a practitioner to interpret your overall results. That's really important. Now, I want to screen share, so let me see if I can do that. And
you should be able to just,
yeah. Right. Are we seeing that?
Yes, we are.
Yep. Cool. So here is, hang on, no, let me go to the presentation. Okay, and I'm just going to move things around a little bit here so I can point at the right things. Okay, so this is about the forms of folate. Folate, folic acid, folinic acid, or the active methylfolate, which is called 5-methyl tetrahydrofolate. And we don't need to know big words like that, but in this diagram, it looks complex, but there's quite a simple message when we clarify it. So up here, we've got your dietary folate, and over here, dietary folate. So when you're talking folates, think foliage, dark green leafies, you know, so in our daily, you know, diet, every day, get some of those dark green leafy veggies into you, because that is a natural form of folate. But as you can see, it goes through quite a pathway. We've got one.
Sorry, Rose, are you able to make it the actual slide bigger? Because we can't see it very closely.
Okay.
It's quite small writing.
Can you see two different?
Yes, two different ones.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's
Can't read it.
Because what I'm seeing on my other screen, I thought you were seeing the. View or play slideshow in full screen. So I would have thought that would I go like that. Oh, you can tell.
What about the Zoom where it says 37%? Can you increase that to 100?
Yeah, how we really big.
Too much.
The problem is
the old.
We're not actually seeing this actual slideshow, I don't think. See, it's this view, isn't it? Hang on, let's get rid of that and do that. There we are. How's that?
That is much better. Sorry, folks, didn't mean to interrupt, but if you have really bad eyesight like me, you wouldn't have been able to read that.
And for some reason, it came up the other way when earlier, I thought, when we did the quick run through. Okay, now we know where we're at, and we'll know for next time, that one. Right, so this is all about your folate, and in this diagram, there's the different forms of folate. It looks complex, but there's quite a clear point that we are going to be getting across to you by the end of this little bit of the presentation. And then we're going to hear from Catherine about some case studies to really bring it to life for you. So up here we have dietary folate. Dietary folate, I was talking about that before, you now know leafy greens. Also over here, folinic acid is a form of folate that you can get from leafy greens, but it's also, we'll talk about that, a potential supplement as well. Now, with anything, any metabolism in the body, there's pathways and there's enzymes. So the ones in yellow here are actually the enzymes which are coded for by different genes. And down here, you'll see the MTHFR gene, which is in fact, it's got a number of variations of it, and individuals might have different what we call SNPs or variations. But for now, we're just bulking them together and talking about MTHFR when we get to there. So it's really important to get your dietary folate in your every day and have that flowing down around here. It gets converted into this form of folate, and then it gets converted with the help of MTHFR into the active form of folate. And the key reason for that is to pass on what's called a methyl group over to this part, which is a 1-carbon pathway together. They make up the methylation. You've heard about methylation. You may or may not have heard about methylation, but that's the key thing. We're trying to pass on a methyl group over to here, which then gets passed into all these pathways. So the methyl group is really important for your DNA synthesis, neurotransmitter synthesis, detoxification, histamine metabolism, estrogen metabolism, fertility, And there's a number of different ways. Methylation is really important for fertility, and that's what you hear about tonight. So just showing you that that's the whole process. We're trying to get the methyl group passed from this wonderful form of folate here over here to do its job in methylation. That's what we're aiming for. Now, when this is all flowing nicely, that's well and good, but sometimes, let's see if we can, here we go. So we're talking about the folic acid, and you can get that through the supplements or fortified foods. Now, folic acid is converted through here to this form of folate, but it's very slow. So it's really quite inefficient. If you only get, Catherine, that's what, 220 micrograms?
Yeah, 220.
That this part of the pathway can handle daily. So if you're taking 5 grams, that's huge amount more than is naturally, or the body can handle using this enzyme here to bring it through to folate and then down to the Th4 folate, which is really important. So first of all, folic acid can be very slow, and it can't cope, like the body does not metabolize that amount, those huge amounts. And Catherine's going to go into what happens around that a bit later. And then if you come down here, so that's slow. And if you come down here and you test and find that you've got a variation or a mutation, a SNP in the MTHFR, that can affect your processing from this form of folate through to the active folate by 60% sometimes, or 30%. It can make you much less efficient. So then you can have a major challenge getting that active form of folate ready to pass on the methyl group and do the work it's meant to do. Further to that, some studies are showing, and more research needs to be done, but some studies are showing that folic acid not only is a slow form, so it's not a really good form to supplement with, it actually blocks the process. So these red lines are showing the indications of where it can block the process. So it not only is a very slow form to be trying to use as a supplement, it can also, it has been shown to block things. So for some people, it's not necessarily going to be a huge problem. If you've got no variations here, no mutations or SNPs here and up here, then maybe it's going to be all right for you. So that's where the gene screening comes in. But that's just a kind of an overall view of the ways that folic acid can not be helpful, and why you want to be looking at other forms of supplement, the folinic acid, but even going straight to the actual active form, although Catherine will talk about what we have to be careful about there. Now, Catherine, have I missed anything? Have I kind of, anything you'd like to add to that?
No, I think you covered that really well.
So if I stop sharing now and pass it over to you.
Awesome. Were you not going to talk about foods as well? Was that part of it or not?
Yeah. I was prepared to. I kind of thought we'd run out of time. So basically, yeah, we've talked about how to eat your folates, you know. Were you talking about the fortified foods?
Yes, you're going to talk about like this, where you can find it in food, and you know, because you can get a lot of it from just what you're eating on a daily basis. Yeah.
Okay, well, I was talking about that, saying about the leafy greens particularly. Get it into, you know, make sure you're eating leafy greens daily. Other good forms, of course, liver is a great form. So yeah, it's essential to be having folates. It's not all about supplementation at all, you know, because we can get your dietary folate straight into this form of folate. which is great because it misses all this pathway here. You can get dietary folate coming straight in here. Yeah, so important to eat those leafy greens. I thought I'd covered that part.
Oh, I think I was meaning you were going to talk about where you can find folic acid, sorry, in terms of foods. Like we were talking about how the flour and breads was going to be next year, they were going to be adding it to bread and
okay, yep, you're correct. I didn't get to that. So with this, we're talking about when supplementing with folic acid, we talked about that. And what a lot of people might not realize is how much food is fortified with folic acid. Now, there's a couple of problems with that in terms of the labeling in New Zealand. The laws say that they don't have to say folic acid, they can actually say folate. So I would be very careful if you see any labels that say folate. It's bound to be actually folic acid. Folic acid, as I said before, was a man-made synthetic form. It's kind of heat resistant and cheap to make, so that's why they make it and use it. But you can actually build up quite a lot of folic acid through your diet, specifically in cereals. If you look on cereal boxes, and what's coming into law in New Zealand mid 2023, next year, is that all bread, so all the flour that is used to bake bread in New Zealand, apart from organic bread, so buying an organic loaf, that's fine, but all the other loaves of bread in New Zealand, the flour for that bread will be fortified with folic acid.
And that includes gluten-free bread as well, does it?
It's all the flours from what I read on the it's both on the MPI website. It says all flour for baking bread has to be fortified from, I did jot it down, mid 2023, so I don't know what month, but it does say that organic bread, they don't have to use the fortified flour. Yeah, but also I spent some time in the supermarket recently looking at a whole lot of cereal boxes, and not many of them say folic acid. A lot of them say folate.
Yes, I had a look at Cocoa Pops, for example, and just to check, and I didn't buy it, obviously, but but I was just interested after what you said the other day, and yeah, folate it says.
Yeah, and you're right, gluten-free. I looked at some gluten-free cereals, and yep, they say folate, or yeah. I think one of the companies did say folic acid, was actually, straight about that. But some people are actually confused. They think that folate and folic acid are the same thing, but they're not. You've got to remember that folic acid is a synthetic form. It isn't handled by the body as well, coming down through this pathway. It's very slow, and the body can only handle that kind of around about the 220, no more than 300 micrograms a day. And that, so when I said earlier about geographic location, that's more about your genes, because different populations have different prevalence of the MTHFR variations, but also the socioeconomic thing, dietary things, what you're eating. If you're very, very low and you're not getting your leafy greens, some folic acid may be of help, but you're only going to be able to use this, is supposing that your genes can handle it, you've got enough of the enzymes. It's still capped at that 220, no more than 300 micrograms. So that's where it's obviously been of some, there's all the research about the NTD, and that's where it has been helpful. But how much better is it to actually make sure you're getting a form of folate that's actually going to do the job and pass on that methyl group. You know, that's the key thing. So yeah, I think, you know, we're now ready to pass it over to you, Catherine.
Absolutely. So if you can stop sharing your screen, and then I'll just change over the post. It's like the good thing about live webinars, isn't it?
Yeah,
All
so
the technical
stuff.
That good at this.
Where are we? We're good.
Awesome. Right. I'm back, and I'm just going to share my screen. So if you just bear with me a second. Work. Alrighty, so I'll just bigger. You can see. So that was just the title page. So I'll just move through that. All right, so we're going to talk about unmetabolized folic acid. So if you can just picture that methylation cycle that Rose has just shown you, the very first enzyme at the beginning. I'm just going to move the camera out the words. I'm just going to move on here. The enzyme, the DHFR enzyme, which was one of the first enzymes in the methylation cycle, which kind of moves through the folic acid and the kind of starts the whole process up. It can only handle, as Rose mentioned, 220 micrograms. And so anything above that actually goes down a different pathway and is converted to unmetabolized folic acid. So essentially, unmetabolized folic acid is just folic acid that's unmetabolized and it's hanging around in the bloodstream. So unmetabolized folic acid actually has no physiological benefit. And I got this from to Ben Lynch, who is a really good functional medicine doctor in America, and he's been one of the founders of really bringing this into the kind of mainstream and really understanding about the MTFHR. So if you want any further information, I'll give you some information on Ben Lynch, and he's a good one to follow if you actually want to really understand it in more detail. But yeah, he says it has actually no physiological benefit. And one of the things it does do is actually it binds to folate receptors and in preference of folate. So, which, as Rose says, actually blocks methylation and leads to a methylfolate deficiency. So you can be taking that 5 milligrams of folic acid, but because you have one of the MTFHR variations, or because, you know, the enzyme can only metabolize 220 micrograms, you can still be folate deficient. And that low methylfolate is actually something that is associated with those neural tube defects. So it is something that's still a risk and contributes to things like recurring miscarriage or IVF failure. So it's really important to look at, you know, really testing to see if you do have that kind of MTFH variant. Another thing that metabolized folic acid does is it actually masks B12 deficiency. So it's really important to not just look at folic acid and folate, is to actually look at all the activated Bs as well, because they actually do play a part. They are cofactors in the methylation too, and particularly B12. And so high amounts of that unmetabolized folic acid actually changes the structure of cells too, and actually can mask the B12 deficiency. So that's just something else to be aware of. And if you're deficient in B12, it's going to really impact your folate metabolism as well. Another thing unmetabolized folic acid does is it leads to high homocysteine in the blood. So homocysteine needs those B12, B6 and folate to actually kind of clear that, and high homocysteine is a risk factor for kind of fertility as well. It can lead to circulation issues, heart issues. It can cause things like blood clots. So it's really important to make sure you're getting those kind of those methyl nutrients, those that, yeah, B6, B12 and folate. High serum folate tests, which is where you get like your standard blood test to test for like B12 and folate, and not a really true indicator of your folate status. And I do see this kind of a lot in clinic where a client will say, look, I've had my folate tested. I've had a folate blood test done and it's fine. And my B12's fine too. So, but what that folate, high serum folate is actually a combination of all kind of the forms of folate. So it would be unmetabolized folic acid, it will be folinic acid, it will be methylfolate. And so there is no way of actually testing that any further to say, well, which percentage of that serum blood folate test is actually unmetabolized folic acid and which percentage of that serum folate test is actually methylfolate. So we have no way of really determining that. So if you have a high serum folate test, it actually could be, you know, a large amount of that could be unmetabolized folic acid. So that's just something to be aware of. Some other kind of interesting facts about unmetabolized folic acid, and this has come from Ben Lynch as well, is that it's found in breast milk. And if the mother has high unmetabolized folic acid, the baby doesn't get the benefit of methylfolate. So the baby's got high amounts of unmetabolized folic acid throughout their bloodstream as well. So it's going to be affecting their brain health, and it's going to be affecting their blood cell production, and it's also going to affect their growth. Wow. And also pregnant mothers with high metabolized folic acid is connected to a high prevalence of children developing autism as well. So there are many factors that can contribute to the development of autism. It's not just specifically unmetabolized folic acid, but that has been studies linking the two as well. So all these are reasons to ensure that you're not getting that high amount of unmetabolized folic acid, kind of blocking your methylation and contributing to all these issues. Does that make sense, Rose? Oh, you've muted yourself. I was going to ask you if that was okay.
I'm sitting away and nodding my head. Yes. That's really great. Really good points, Catherine. And okay. I keep picturing the pathways and would love to be pointing to them for you while you were speaking. But I think I went over it enough. It's clear.
Yeah. So I've kind of repeated a lot of what Rose has said about the unmetabolized folic acid blocking kind of the methylation pathways and things like that. So it's not something that's ideal. It's actually quite detrimental for our health. And so it can be avoided. And it can be avoided by supplementing with the methylfolate and not folic acid, and also to eat, folate rich foods. Those dark leafy greens are the best form, and having a serving daily is going to be, the best way to go. So now I'm actually just going to run through a few case studies. So first of all, before I talk about these case studies, I just want to sort of mention that there is a simple test that you can do. It's a blood test that practitioners like myself and Rose can actually organise, which actually just tests those two of the most common MTFHR mutations or variations, which can actually have an impact on the enzyme, sort of ability of the enzyme to kind of function. And so the two are the 677CT and the 1298C, and you can either be heterozygous, which means that you have basically one copy of the mutation, or you can have homozygous, which is basically means you have two copies. The one copy is you've got from one parent, and basically if you've got two copies of the mutation, then you have one from both parents. So it's something that gets passed on. And likewise, what's that, sorry?
That's the MTHFR. These are MTHFR.
Yes. That's what I'm talking. Yeah. Sorry, I should have mentioned about the MTFHR ones. So not all the other genes. This is just the MTFHR ones. So you can get a simple blood test to just check that. And so a couple of the case studies that I've worked with, this one was from last year. So female, age 42, and she's been trying to conceive for 5 years and has had, I think it was about 2 or 3 recurring miscarriages and an IVF failure, and came to see me just really about improving nutrition. And so we tested her for the MTFHR variations, and she tested as a homozygous for the A129C mutation, which means she has 2 copies of the mutation, so 1 from each parent. And with that, she has a minimum of 40% loss of enzyme function. So that means, yeah, that it's really, her enzyme is really working at 60%. And so prior to coming to see me, she had been prescribed 5 milligrams of folic acid through her fertility specialist. And that's pretty much all she was taking. So she was just taking the 5 milligrams of folic acid. So as you can see from that, the fact that she's got that double mutation and she's only got a 60% enzyme function, plus absolutely saturating her body with folic acid, we can see where things were likely to be going astray with her. So what do we do? So we switched to a prenatal multi with methylfolate and activated Bs. So really important to get the whole big group vitamins, because they do work as a team, and particularly the activated Bs as well. My favorite brand, if I'm allowed to say, is actually the NaturBest prenatal multi. I've had some really good results with that with clients, and they do have their methylfolate, but also choline as well, which is another methyl donor, which is really important for the whole methylation sort of cycle. So, and choline in particular has become kind of as important as folate in terms of prevention of neural tube defects and the brain health of the baby. And, it was not something that was on the radar 10 years ago, but now we're very much aware of the importance of choline. So you can get a good source of choline in the NaturBest multi. We also gave her extra, I can't really see my writing, it's behind the camera, extra MTFHR, which is the RN Labs brand I used, which gives 500 micrograms. Because she's over 42, I actually prescribed her 2 of the 500 micrograms plus the prenatal multi. We also looked at stress management, and we did an autoimmune protocol. We tested for thyroid antibodies, and her thyroid antibodies through the roof. So she had signs of kind of autoimmune thyroid going on. So it's not just about taking folate. There's a lot of things also that contribute to how your kind of genes function and how your body functions, and diet, lifestyle, getting rid of all kind of inflammatory kind of issues that are going to be affecting things, particularly autoimmune. So we did a lot of work on that, and she conceived naturally at age 43 while waiting for her next IVF cycle, and she gave birth to a healthy baby girl early this year. So that was a really good outcome. And the baby is doing very well, which is awesome. So that was case study 1. Case study 2, a couple in the early 30s had experienced 2 miscarriages in a chemical pregnancy, and tested heterozygous 1 copy for the 677TC variation. So she has a 40% reduction in enzyme function, was taking Elevate, which has 800 micrograms of folic acid for both of the pregnancies, which ended up in miscarriage, which is around about the 12-week mark, which is very sad and very stressful. And she was actually very surprised by the whole thing. We did actually spend a lot of time working on her gut health over a good couple of years before she was ready to conceive again. We also looked at iron levels. She did GAPS diet, and we did a lot of hormone support. In the lead up, sort of 6 months prior to when she was trying to conceive again, we got her on a prenatal multi, which was the NaturBest multi with activated Bs and extra methylcobalamin. And because she had low her B12 was less than what I would say is ideal, which would be around kind of the 500 mark or more, and it was really around about the 280. So understanding how B12 is really important for the whole kind of methylation cycle, we got her on some B12 as well. And so she conceived naturally pretty much straight away and is currently 28 weeks pregnant, and everything's going really well. So those are the kind of 2 standout one. So I've got quite a few other ones. I've currently got a lady who's doing IVF coming up. She's had a lot of failed sort of miscarriages and failed IVFs, and I tested her, and she was actually homozygous for the 1298C AC variation, which is again a 40% reduction. So we got, for the last like 6 months, she's been really good. We've got her on a prenatal multi, we've got her on the extra methylfolate. We've been working on all those diet and lifestyle factors, and she's just about to start another cycle of IVF, but her fertility clinic are insisting that she stops what she's taking and take 5 milligrams of folic acid. So as you can probably understand after listening to this, that she was very stressed about it. So we had a good chat, gave her lots of reading, and she's gone away, and she said all's well. So I'm hoping she's actually not got on the 5 milligrams of folic acid, but we shall wait and see. But it's understandably very hard when you've got conflicting information from two different areas. So it's really about getting as much information as you can, getting yourself tested. And that's the thing, is she does have that double mutation, so it is a big risk factor, her taking 5 milligrams of folic acid. So I'm only hoping that she listened and read all the resources I kind of gave her. So yeah, we'll wait and see what happens there.
And we should hope with things like that, as time goes on, like as I made the point, that genetic screening is fairly recent, science. So it's like turning, something major around with that whole concept of how we approach health and fertility. And we've got all these wonderful resources and testing that we can do, including the genetic screening now. So it gives insight into what's going on for an individual, and they might, and that's really, really important. And we can only hope that that becomes more well known and understood, so these poor women are not put in this position of, it's so much stress trying to decide what to do when they're being told different things. And that's where, what you've done, giving her that information through the gene screening is just going to be hugely powerful for her to be able to make good decisions. We can really just cheer her on, really, can't we?
And she's felt so much better as well over the last 6 months with what she's been taking.
Well done.
So hopefully that will have a positive effect. All right, so that's the end of the case study. So are there any questions in the chat box, Rose? I haven't checked.
Let's have a wee look. Yep, we have right. I'll just jot them down because I have to jump from one screen to another. Oh, actually, I'll just call them out. So where can I get the active form of folate, the methylfolate one that you were talking about?
It's a little bit tricky. Some health shops might have it. It mainly needs to go through a practitioner to get it, like myself or yourself. Solgar used to do a folate, and that was available via retail, but since kind of the whole pandemic, Solgar has not been able to supply a lot of their stuff, and some of the key ones have been folate and B12 as well. They're kind of methylcobalamin. They haven't been able to supply that, so that it's not easy to just pop into a shop and actually buy folate. I mean, you can check with your local health store, maybe they'll be able to order it through to you, but you can easily get it prescribed through practitioners like myself. And same with the Naturobest multi, that's a practitioner only one. So
one thing I'd like to add to that too, even if you can get hold of the methylfolate, you wouldn't want to suddenly be taking high doses of it.
Oh yes, that's right, I was going to mention that.
That can, you can have detrimental symptoms and things like
Yeah.
that.
Some of the ones that can happen if you jump straight into a high dose is like kind of anxiety and kind of agitation and feeling really
and just add to your challenges. So
yeah,
definitely best to work with a practitioner there to take you gently through it, really. But yeah. But beware if you do get hold of it and you're going to try it by yourself. Just be aware of that and don't suddenly take high doses.
And how much to take is also dependent on a number of factors as well. For example, what your mutation is, if you have one, your age, your history, all those things. I don't have a standard amount that I give people. I will be determined by all those factors and also how they handle the methylfolate to start with.
Gently. And as you say, the different mutations, whether the homozygous, heterozygous, things like that. So quite a varied. Would you agree?
And if they're that's right. And if they have a double mutation and they're in their 40s, for example, they'll be going at the higher end of what they can take daily. And if they're kind of in their 20s or 30s, they can pretty much get away with, maybe even just the prenatal multi.
There's another question here. What prenatal multi do you recommend? Well,
I've already answered that one. Well, mine's Naturibest. Do you have a favourite?
I use a Naturibest too.
Yeah.
I find that good. And that's great basic for everybody, really. Just I'm quite happy to recommend that one. And we've got another one. What if I'm already on folic acid? So we would say don't freak out by what we've said. We don't want to scare people at all. Probably the best thing we could recommend is to test. Get that gene screen done and get some insight as to actually whether you could should be avoiding folic acid totally. And when we say avoiding folic acid totally, people, we need to add it up in the fortified foods too, but that's another thing. So obviously many people have taken folic acid and had successful pregnancies. We are specifically talking about, well, first of all, we would not recommend folic acid, but if you're taking it, never fear, you can change over, you can swap over, do it gently, get some help, see a practitioner and get tested.
And eat leafy greens.
Oh, absolutely.
Because
that's a basic.
at least you can, if you're worried about you might have a functional folate deficiency because you're taking folic acid. The best way to get it is through food as well. That's one way of doing it. I'll just talk very quickly about my situation. So I sort of mentioned earlier, it took me 10 years to have a secondary infertility is quite a big issue. A lot of people seem to be okay having their first child with folic acid. And then I guess to stress and some metabolic changes and things, we're never the same people after we've had one baby. When they go to have the second, it's then that we see a lot of these issues coming up with the the MTHFR and the infertility and the recurring miscarriage, more so than with primary. With my situation is that I thought I was doing the right thing, so I took folate. So I took a good dose of folate for about 5 years, sort of as I was learning and understanding all this. But I took the Solgar prenatal multi, and that had folic acid, and it had, I think it's either 400 or 800 micrograms of folic acid. And it was only really in the last couple of years before I actually finally conceived that I suddenly realized what was happening. And I literally went on a mission to get rid of every single item of folic acid. And, it sneaks into all sorts. Iron supplements, for example. You might be taking iron and it's got folic acid in. A liver support, all these things. It sneaks in everywhere. So once it was finally gone, maybe that was something to do with it. I never actually got around to testing my genes, to be honest, but I'm pretty sure if I had it done, there would have been an issue there. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd be very interested to see your genes.
Yeah. It was just all new, and I was like, a lot of trying to save money and
and really, as you say, it wasn't it's as the understandings come and more people, like the research is building, but the science and the screening and that hasn't been there.
No, I mean, when it first was kind of become a thing, it was having these expensive gene tests done through
really
23andMe and Fit Genes and all that. That was your only way to do it. But it's not.
Well, I found that, like, the labs I work with, because of course I do gene screening for quite a lot of pathways. I like to see the big picture and how people interpret that, and the ones I've worked with, the prices are coming down, but I wouldn't be going off with the ones that you've just mentioned. But yeah. Yeah. Hey, one more question here. How long would you expect it takes to clear folic acid from my body?
Oh, good question. Do you know the answer to that one, Rose?
Well, I mean, it's going to vary, obviously, but I'm kind of saying about 2-3 months, even 4 months. It's going to take a wee while. You don't see anyone who suddenly comes off it, and then next week they're pregnant, kind of thing. So and the body usually takes a wee while. I don't know that there's any studies on it. I have looked before. I might have missed them, but I'm kind of always thinking around the 2 to 4 months. It could be longer for some people, possibly. Obviously, it depends on your levels. It depends on your the clearance pathways, and when not just talking about we're actually talking about the clearance pathways. So what variations you might have there. Yeah, I can't really kind of say anything definite, but it sounds like we haven't. Well, that's something we'll have to look into, won't we? See if there's any research.
Yeah.
Have a better idea for our clients.
Okay. Is there any more questions, or is that the last one?
That's it. But good questions. Really good.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. So, thanks for attending, and I think we've gone on a little bit longer. Oh, yes, quite a lot longer. So thanks for staying with us. So there will be a recording available, and we'll email that out to you. But just if you need any further information, this has been up on the screen for a while, but you can look at my website. I've got a lot of information and blogs on my website, and you can follow myself or Rose on social media. I do a free 15-minute consultation by phone or Zoom. If you just want to have a quick chat kind of about, I think, Rose, you do that as well, don't you? Yeah. I also have a small Facebook group, which we go into more specifics about kind of fertility nutrition. So you're welcome to join that. You can find the link to the Facebook group in the fertility nutritionforhealth.com/fertility nutrition page. So you can find it all on there. So Rose, do you want to just talk about your offerings there?
Yeah, I obviously do specific preconception preparation consultations. I do a couples package too. We've been talking about the women here tonight, but actually men's fertility is affected by methylation. So, I mean, it's affected by many things, but we're specifically talking about your folates for methylation here, and sperm health is affected by methylation, so really important not to forget the men here. I'm really quite proactive about that. We tend to to be honest, it's the women we get most of the inquiries from. Yeah, so couples, I also do a couples program, which isn't individualized consultations in the terms of our clinical nutrition, but it is a program about preparing for successful fertility and successful conception. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm hoping to get an online program up and available before too long. And yeah, I'm a bit active on Facebook and Instagram, and yeah, I'd like to hear from you, really. You know, as Catherine has said, it's great, and as you can see from her case studies, love hearing the positives and wonderful outcome with when you welcome a lovely wee person into your family.
All right, so we'll finish there then. So yeah, if you have any other questions, just feel free to contact us through our various channels, and we'll say good night. So good night, everyone.
Good night.